Have your attention, please. We'll begin the annual meeting of the Office of Inspector General. Would you call the roll, please, and see if we have a quorum?
Commissioner Edward Rogers.
Here.
Commissioner Manuel Farag.
Here.
Commissioner Robin Fiore.
Present.
Commissioner Ronald Harbison.
Here.
Commissioner Bruce Reinhardt. State Attorney Michael McAuliffe. Here. Public Defender Kerry Howitt. Here.
I received notice from Mr. Reinhardt. He will not be here today. First of all, I'd like for those of us who have cell phones to turn them off or put them on quiet or buzz or whatever you can do. And keep your voices down. And if you have any questions, we'll have a time for question period a little later on. I guess we're pretty much talking to the choir, but after reading the paper this morning, I would like to say this will be my last time as chairperson, and then we'll change chairs. But I wanted to say that I really enjoyed working here. I hope that I'll still be on the committee, but I wanted to say that it's been a pleasure here. We have a tremendous job to do, and we've received as much bad press as we can get legitimately. And I wanted to reply somewhat to the Forbes statement that it's a city of misery, and just remind us all that we're all tied together here. So we're going to have to suffer for whatever happens to anybody else, any others of the 38 cities or 37 cities that we have. It's been a pleasure working here. We've done the best we could, and we've been in business here for 2 years, but it took a long time to get out of the birth canal, and it's kind of hard to come out of there running. Anyhow, and so we've had to take it a little slow. I know we've had some bumps in the road, but I would really like to ask for us to come together and do the best we can to try to teach attitudes. That's what this is all about. We need to change attitudes because we're all susceptible to infectious greed. And greed creates corruption. And the only treatment for that is change attitudes. Sort of like any other addictions. The more you do it, the more corrupt it's going to be. So we hopefully that we can stick with these organizations and give us time to grow and time to make some adjustments that we have to make, because in dealing with attitudes, ethics, and integrity, these things are so undefinable. As I always say, it's sort of like pornography. You just know it when you see it. And it's kind of hard to put it in a box and say all of this is one thing or the other. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity of having been able to serve you and ask for your tolerance. And let's try to get together to see if we can't work out a lot of these things that problems that are confronting us. With that being said, the first thing on the agenda is the approval of the committee minutes for the meeting in August. Probably moved in second. Any questions, comments? All in favor indicate by saying aye. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Commissioner, I had a question. October.
October? Okay. All in favor of the approval of the minutes for August? And we've already done that. Any opposals? Motion's carried unanimously. Next, a motion for the October meeting. May I have a motion?
Before we have a
Okay.
motion, Chair Rogers, I had a question. I didn't recall discussion regarding staff directives. So I looked back to the minutes, and I didn't see those in there, and I don't know if anybody else did. And we're going to get to staff directives, I guess. Excuse my cold. If someone can't hear me, please let me know. I guess at 5 is where we're going to get to it. If you look at 5, at the start it says that we were given, the staff was given direction to prepare a human resource operating procedure. You can't hear me? I'm sorry about that. It's just my cold.
Is Roman numeral 5 on October?
Yes. And I didn't see that in the minutes, and perhaps someone can refresh my memory on that, because I don't recall giving staff direction on that issue.
All right. Roman numeral 5, what page is that? Page 4?
I'm obviously not looking at the same thing as Commissioner
Oh.
Faraci.
No, agenda item 5.
Oh, it's agenda.
And then here's my question mark. Agenda item 5 says at the start, at the October 6th meeting, staff were given direction to prepare a human resource operating procedure. And I didn't see that in the minutes for October 6th. And it may be me that missed it, but I don't see it anywhere. It isn't there? Okay.
It's
I'm
to
sorry,
be a
go ahead.
misstatement on my part. I did author this draft policy, and
Okay.
it was my understanding of that. I did not check the minutes to see that it was in there, and
Okay.
maybe I misheard.
I wanted to make sure I hadn't missed something.
Okay.
Okay, but, all right, let's, I don't have a problem with the
Yeah,
minutes.
well, I had some discussion with the inspector about developing some procedural problems. So I didn't check the minutes on it to see whether it was. So was that, what was the basis of that? And did you receive a copy of the staff of the development of their procedural problems?
Yeah, I received what's at agenda item 5.
Uh-huh.
I think there's two elements here, and what's missing is, you're correct, Commissioner, we actually had talked about it in the October 6th meeting, but it's not mentioned in the minutes. So somewhere in the minutes, it does mention where we brought up the HR function, which drove why we wrote the policy. But then in addition, Commissioner Rogers wanted to have a little bit more of what's their responsibility, what's your all's responsibility as the IG committee. So there's probably a line or two in the tapes that would need to go back and add when the commissioner brought up the subject of the HR and the evaluation and that kind of things.
Okay, has everyone received a draft of those, and are we prepared to take action on those today, or do you need more time?
I'd like to have them deferred until the next meeting because
Okay.
there's some confusion about what was said.
Yeah.
Is that all right with you, Commissioner Faraci?
That would probably be best, because I want, obviously, what we're seeking and hoping to achieve is transparency. And if we're going to adopt it, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Do the minutes follow the same process where someone actually listens to the tapes, or are we just looking at the transcription?
The clerk prepared the minutes, and we did review the tapes, but I must have missed that it was not in the minutes.
Okay.
But I'll go back and double-check that and resubmit the minutes to you after
Sure.
this meeting.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Thank
okay.
you.
Great.
Well, I think, Mr. McCullough.
So we'll defer the review of the minutes from the October meeting, but
No, not totally. Do we need to do that, or just the,
I think it's appropriate to adopt the minutes right now, but also go back and review them, and at the next semi-annual meeting, which will be 6 months from now per the ordinance, if there are corrections that need to be made at that time, I'll do it this way. I'll make the motion to adopt the minutes, so that way I can also make the motion to amend
all right,
6 months from now.
may we have a second?
I'll second it.
Probably moved in second, we adopt the minutes of the October meeting, is that which one?
August.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Guys have it, motion's carried. Now, perhaps we need to give some instruction as to when we'd like to take up the staff. You want it tabled until the next meeting?
No, I'll be happy to make a motion that at the next meeting, we have an affirmative statement about the fact that the minutes are correct or they need amendment. Is that a fair?
That's what I hope to do.
Okay.
I understand that IG staff is going to look back at the tapes and find out, this stuff happens all the time.
So it'll
We
be
just want to make
specific
sure
to
that it's
That's
cleared up and we have a clear public record.
Okay, then I guess for the record, we probably need to amend the order, change the order of the meeting to table this matter, or?
No, I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. I
we
think
don't
we can take up 5 when we get to it, and at
Right.
that point discuss it.
Okay,
But we don't, I saw a discrepancy in the record between the minutes and agenda item 5, and my memory is not as good as it was.
but all of you, all right,
So,
has anybody not received the copy of the proposed procedural changes from the staff, so we're ready to discuss it? Okay, and that being so, the minutes having been adopted, I guess we're ready then for the annual report from the Inspector General, who will give that.
Well, good morning, and I tend to have lots of slides, as you all know. What's going to transpire here is we actually do the annual report and the 6-month report, so it's going to be a little lengthy. I'll try to shorten some of it. If I shorten too much of it, let me know. But I'm going to take you through, this would be good if I turned it on, take you through first the annual report, then I'm going to take you through a little bit of the budget and staffing for this fiscal year. We'll talk about the activities of the office and then additional responsibilities, our plans and objectives, and our immediate and ongoing, which are all requirements under the ordinance. As you all know, we publish our audit and investigative reports that are all on the website, as well as some of our contract activity. We meet with you all twice a year, and also no later than December 31st, we issue our annual report. This is a copy of the annual report. It is on the website, and I'm going to take you through some of the highlights of that report. This report actually extended from inception in June when I walked in the door to the fiscal year end of September 30, so it's actually 15 months of activity. We wanted to get on the same cycle as the county, so we carried this through September, and from now on it'll be October 1 through September 30. To give you a little bit of kind of what our staff and who we've been hiring, we hired from both local, state, federal. We hired private sector, public sector. We have members of the staff, everything from the U.S. Department of Treasury, the FBI. We have people in the construction industry on staff, even from the community-based care organizations. So we have a nice breadth of different types of backgrounds in our office that really complements all the activities that we need to oversee. To give a little bit of a flavor of the types of licenses and certifications the office, some of the staff hold, anything from, of course, being a certified inspector general all the way to a certified fraud examiner, a certified internal auditor, and a systems internal auditor. We have a forensic interview. We also have a engineer on staff, member of the Florida Bar, and many, many other in the building contracting arena as well. I heard a lot about people indicating where our staff coming from. We actually have 79% of the staff we've hired are from the state of Florida. 5 have been from out of state. In fact, one of them actually used to live in this county and work in this county and came back home. And of the actually 18 that we have on staff, over half of them are actually here from Palm Beach County. Our budget, as you know, we have a budget that determines our funding base is to be a 0.025, a quarter of 1%, and more importantly, that we're to be adequately funded. The budget for the first 15 months, we actually only spent 71% of what we were allocated, and when we looked at the cost per citizen, that actually came out to about 89 cents, which we equate to 2 postage stamps. To show the return on investment of the 1.3 that we spent, we actually questioned costs and identified costs of $2.3 million. For the first 15 months of opening the doors, we answered over 400, almost 1,500 telephone calls and received over 300 written correspondences. We actually opened up 9 investigations, of which 18 allegations consisted within those 9, in between investigations and management reviews, and we questioned costs of over $600,000. We do have restitution pending over $226,000. The nice part about this is of the corrective actions that we actually recommended, they actually implemented 41 of the 46, which is a pretty high statistic. It's very good. And 24 of those were policy. Of the 307 written correspondences, 261 of them were actual complaints that came to our office. This is an interesting statistics because, of course, as you know, we did not take the municipalities on until June 1, so this is just 3 months activity of the municipalities, plus a few people actually sent us municipalities even when we didn't have jurisdiction. But this is actually now what you'll see in the next report. This is actually now flip-flop. We actually have over 50% of the municipalities now that we've taken them on since July 1. For the first 15 months, the majority of the complaints were coming in from the Water Utilities Department. They were coming in about the Board of County Commission and or their staff, zoning, public safety, and community service. Sort of a wide breadth, a little bit here, a little bit there. in the municipalities from the June 1 on, or the few that came in before that, Riviera Beach and Lake Worth had the majority of the complaints that came in, followed by West Palm Beach, Wellington, Loxahatchee Groves, Boca, Lake Park, Delray, Palm Beach Gardens, and then Boynton. It traditionally, misconduct, and it's pretty much remaining the same, is traditionally the highest type of allegation that we receive in the office, followed by contract improprieties and falsification. Of the 9 investigative reports that we issued with the 18 allegations, it resulted in 3 arrests, and 2 are actually have a pending forfeiture on their pension. There were 3 dismissals, 3 resignations, and a suspension. And there were also 9 not supported findings, and 1 employee actually was reinstated. And as I've always said, it's just as important to clear somebody as to say somebody did something wrong. And we were pretty much 50% on both sides. And again, the results of the first year in were $611,000 in identified and questioned costs. And then, as I believe we talked about, I think in the October meeting, but we did have one interesting case where it was actually a citizen that was being, we had a county employee, and the code enforcement was actually taking bribes and having people pay him $1,000 to do, to pretty much close their code enforcement violations. And one victim wound up coming forward, and through the state attorney's office, we actually got restitution for that person. And that person's no longer here, moved away, and pension forfeitures were going on for his pension as well. For the recommended corrective actions that we talked about in the investigative unit, we had 46, of which 44 they've already implemented. In the contract world, we spent a lot of time, as we talked about, really reviewing and sitting in as a proactive measure to really understand the dynamics of how contracting happens both in the county and then we started in the municipalities. So we attended actually 173 contract selection committees. In July 1 of this year, though, we started to realize that we really need to start writing about this. And so we began to issue contract oversight reports. And in that first 3 months, we issued 6, and we questioned a total cost of $1.7 million. There were 6 recommendations for improvements, which 4 were in the process of being implemented. In total, we actually recommended 15. Yes.
Yes, sir.
On the contract oversight report,
Mm-hmm.
you give the covered entity an opportunity to respond to the report, is that correct?
When it is a contract notification, if it's a contract observation, there's no recommendations. If there's a recommendation, we do a contract notification, and yes, they do get a chance to respond to the notification and provide input, and that gets attached to the final report.
Okay. And of the 6 improvements, 4 have been either agreed to or adopted or in process. The other 2, did the entities respond and say, no, this is what we made a determination otherwise, or was it that they didn't respond at all?
I'd have to double check, but I think on the other 2 is more that thank you very much, and we'll look at it, but it wasn't a commitment. So we'll still monitor it to make sure if we wind up seeing the situation again. But that's probably what happened in those circumstances where they would have implemented it, they would have put it. So I'm not really sure, but that probably is what happened on those 2. I know on the investigative side, they just chose not to implement those.
Okay, as a procedural matter, let's see if we can hold the questions till the end so that we won't get hung up on 1 or 2 things and we can get through the complete report. So if you just write your questions down until the end, we'll deal with them at that time. All right.
In total, there were 53 corrective actions made, of which the county and the municipalities implemented 91% of them, and 54% of them were actually policy recommendations. And that's a good thing. That's the beginning of how you tighten controls and the hopes that activities that happened in the past, there's better controls around to avoid it from happening again. So we actually look at that as a very, very positive sign of improvement. And again, the total question costs were a little over $2.3 million. This fiscal year, to give a perspective of what we oversee, in the county and the 38 municipal budgets, it's a $9.8 billion operation. And of course, this does not include our new Solid Waste Authority, Healthcare District, or Children's Service Council, and over almost $1.6 billion in contract activity. Our minimum funding base at the .025 would have allotted us $4 million. And as you know, I can go in front of the board and reduce that if we feel we don't need that much funding. We did that this year based on the needs, and we reduced it to the 0.18%, which was $2.8 million. Staff-wise, again, this is to give some perspective of the volume. You know, there are over 15,000 employees between the county and the municipals, and this does not include all the contract vendors and employees that we have to, deal with as well at times. And currently, for the county and the municipality, we only have 15 staff. We anticipate to have 32. The good news, Tuesday night, the Board of County Commission stepped forward and agreed to fund the $400,000, which of the $1.2 million that the municipalities are supposed to be paying, which will help us get through the end of the year and begin to start hiring that staff. Just so you understand, the LOGR system is the funding base that was agreed upon at the drafting committee. The drafting committee was selected with both county representatives, county attorney's office, city representatives, League of City Attorney, as well as myself. And then there was a subcommittee that was a budget subcommittee that was set forth with members of all parties. And they brought forward to the drafting committee the recommendation to use the LOGR system. It was the most easiest, simplest, audited, reliable system to use. And that is what is currently being used to determine that funding base. The municipalities in the county, however, separate from the funding base, can choose different ways to come up for that money. They can charge the vendors and contractors now with the ordinance that's in effect. They can take it from general revenue, which is what the county initially decided to do. Now they're going to be switching gears and going to the contract activity, or they can charge to other various accounts. That does not preclude them in the ordinance today. They can do it any way they want. So I know there's been some confusion, but they can charge the contractors now. What's now being in question is the funding base. 6-month activity. We issued our first audit. It was on the Palm-Tran audit. This was a result that the county came to us on an employee that was suspected of stealing toner cartridges. And it turned out we worked with between the state attorney's office and the sheriff's office. It was a great joint investigation. They wound up handling the subject, and it turned out that they found over $18,000 of stolen goods from toner cartridges and other things. We decided, based on what we were receiving with the investigation, that there were other issues, control problems, so we opened an audit, and we found various internal control problems, from everything from lack of good surveillance to poor inventory, and in addition, we found out that that employee also handled the payroll, and their entire payroll system was in great need of repair. Timesheets weren't being approved, supervisor approvals, so a lot of overtime. It needed some serious tightening. The director of Palm-Tran readily accepted the audit, readily accepted the findings, implemented a lot of the findings while we were doing the audit, and it was great for everybody. So he definitely feels more comfortable that the controls are now in place. We also attended in the last 6 months 33 selection committees. We've had to cut back on that due to the lack of staff. So our prevention side of the house has slowed down. We did issue 10 reports so far, and again, at the tune of $1.7 million. And now there's been 9 corrective actions with the 7, so I'll have to look at those other 2 and find out what those were. In the 6 months, we've handled 964 calls, 185 written correspondences, and we've opened up 7 management reviews and/or investigations, a total of 14 allegations. We've identified and questioned costs of $289,000. We've already received restitution for almost $1,600. And we've got another restitution pending of $224,000. And all the corrective actions that we have recommended so far in the 6 months have all been implemented or in progress. Types of correspondences. Here's where we're starting to see the shift now. Now we've had the cities on for 6 months, the municipalities, and we're starting to see the shift now. Of course, we're a larger group of 38 entities, but now we're seeing the workload is at 46%. Of correspondences coming in, and the county's slowly dropping down to 36. Solid Waste Authority has a small percentage. The other non-jurisdiction is traditionally, everything from the clerk of the court, the sheriff's office, property appraiser, it's the school board. Those fall into that other category. On the top 9, water utilities is starting to slow down a little bit, but they're still on the top of the list, as well as the Board of County Commission and/or their staff. Public safety and purchasing, we're 3 and 4, and so forth. In the municipalities, Riviera Beach right now has the most correspondences coming in. Wellington right behind them, Lake Worth, Loxahatchee Groves, West Palm Beach, Boynton, and Palm Beach Gardens. top 10 allegations continues again to be employee misconduct is clearly the highest amount of allegations that we get, followed by contract improprieties, financial improprieties, and falsification. Those seem to stay pretty steady. Take you into some of the cases we had. This was a situation, this was brought to us by the county. It was an employee that was falsifying her application to get housing assistance. And as a result of that, through the great work of the state attorney's office, they were able to arrest her and charge her with 2 counts, one for scheme to defraud and one for mortgage fraud. And her conviction at this time is still pending, and restitution will be at $212,800. And the county right now is working to get the house back. Small business assistance, we had this was a spinoff of the management review where we had a small business that was actually providing misleading or falsified documentation to attain the SBE credit, and also that the department also failed to adequately address concerns. This was a situation where repeatedly, year after year after year, another business kept complaining about this company, and it just never got to the point where they were able to really prove what was going on. So we wound up finding out and worked initially through the state attorney's office, but then we handled it administratively. And at the end of the day, the county went back and looked at everywhere where he was not eligible as an SBE and determined and got them out of those contracts. And the county also suspended the vendor for 2 years. This was a case about a Head Start program. This was a safety issue. This is where children were put at risk. There was an allegation that the employees there were not properly certified. We take children's safety very seriously. The good news was that the allegations were not correct at all, and that all employees had the certifications that they needed. So it was a good thing, and no corrective actions were warranted on that. This also came to us from the county, and I will say the county does a good job in getting us the complaints and the referrals. They really do. This also came from the county. They had concerns after they had done their audit that there were a few employees that were not eligible still they had given a grace period, and that they still were not eligible for health insurance. We actually were able to clear 2 of them. There was just faulty forms and some misinterpretations, so we were able to clear them. They were fine. But one employee actually had several paramours claiming his husband overtime. And she subsequently was suspended and had to pay back, or has to pay back, the money that she took. And also there was there was a problem with the declaration of domestic partner form. So through the county, they worked with the clerk of court to fix that problem, and that will solve a lot of what was going on with the other 2 employees. We had a whistleblower investigation, and this was a safety issue. There's an on-call policy in the fleet management area that if you're not in the area but you're on call or off call. So we went ahead and looked into this, and in a nutshell, basically, this really turned out to be confusion, I think, on employees that really didn't know, because there really wasn't clear written policy on this issue. And had there been good policy, probably this might not have even been brought to our attention. But we actually cleared all the employees. There was no wrongdoing. It's just nobody really knew what the outline and the roles were when you're, what constitutes when you're in the area. Does that mean in Palm Beach County? Does that mean in the neighboring county? So there was some confusion in that area. We also asked them to develop, to document when you do the vehicle inspections, because they indicated that the car had been hit in an accident, and there was really no clear documentary path for that. So they willingly took the recommendations and are making those policies. This was another one that was brought to us by the county. There was one victim at the time that was brought to us that there seemed to be that there was a not-for-profit that was pushing for a certain amount of money, between $1,500 plus, that you had to pay in order to get your application through. This was a great example of a joint investigation with multi-agencies. We actually called in the Department of Financial Regulation as well as the Public Integrity Unit to the State Attorney's Office, and they did a fantastic job of this case, because this was a situation where most of the victims did not speak English. They were either trilingual speaking individuals, and so the Division of Financial Regulation actually had a trilingual investigator, and they were able to identify, through the work and the help of the Housing Department, we were able to identify another additional 20 victims. We wound up getting 10 more, where the state attorney was able to charge 5 persons with 5 counts of grand theft, a count of scheming to fraud, and money laundering. This case is pending, and even though it wasn't a lot of money per se, $16,000, you can imagine to someone whose dream is to buy a first home what that meant. and it was deplorable, and OFR went ahead and suspended immediately their licenses of these individuals. This was a situation the town manager actually asked us to review. They had an issue with the next employee that was accessing their systems, and bottom line was there were no policies around what happens to, when an employee is terminated, how to cut off their access, and they had not been doing that. So we've helped them with that arena to, help them to recommend some corrective action on putting some security policies in place, making sure they terminate the access codes to their databases when employees leave. And then we didn't find any improper storage. They thought she was storing things off-site, and we didn't find anything there. Public outreach, we've done in the 6 months 22 speeches and/or trainings and reached about 885 individuals. We had 58 media contacts. And effective January 1, we now have Healthcare District and Children's Service Council, both with very large, sizable budgets. So we're going to be very busy. The strategic plan. This is on the website. We've added that in the back of your packet so you have it. When we finally had our senior leaders at the table and our middle up, yes.
Would this be a good time for us to give you questions
Sure.
about the area we just covered?
Absolutely.
Before we go into a different place? Are there any questions from the commission on what we discussed so far?
Indeed.
Okay? Ms. Howard?
When you reference question cost and the amount, are those, are you essentially saying that was money that should not have been spent
Correct.
rather than more was spent than needed to be spent or anything? This is the excess?
Well, it could be both. It could be where we question should it have even happened, or we question the amount of it. So the question cost can fall in those categories where when we identify this is a specific amount that needs to be returned.
But of the question cost, it's not necessarily that that funding is being returned.
That's correct. Yeah. What the hope is that in the future they don't make the same errors, so we prevent that happening again and we prevent future losses.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Dr. Fiore?
I have a couple of questions. We're still getting to know you and how you operate, so if these seem odd, it's just an opportunity for you to educate us. They're sort of all over the place, but I mentioned at the last meeting that my priority was contract oversight. So when you said that we had to suspend our contract oversight because we didn't have enough people, I'm concerned about how you assign priorities. And then I see that there are numerous very small dollar amount investigations that take place with the state attorney's office. And so I just don't understand how you assign priority and what would make you suspend contract oversight where the huge dollars and the real endemic corruption is in this county.
When I said I suspended us sitting in the selection committees, the front end of the contract. Where we are now at is the back end of the contract. We are reviewing change orders. We are reviewing the dollars. That's where our resources had to go. What we were hoping for is to really help. A lot of the municipalities don't do a lot of contracting, and they were really asking us for best practices, how to do. And so we were really trying to be more front-end preventative with part of the majority of the contract staff initially. But because of the funding issue, the staff that we have, I had to make a decision, and we now, on the back end of the contracts, or the after the fact, we have several contract reviews open right now with substantial monies that are being reviewed that will be coming out. And so we shifted gears to the priority on things that had already been issued and looking at should the money have gone out the door.
If you can tell by my face, I disagree. So part of what I want to accomplish today is to ask you to rethink that and get back in the business of proactive pre-contract advising to the extent possible. From my point of view, that's what the Inspector General should be doing. I really don't care that much about, and this is personal, so other commissioners will have other views, but I'm not all that worried about some of the other things that have been involved in, even though I know that those are wrongdoing and those are things that you can fix easily with some sort of intervention. So I just want to stress that from my point of view, contract. So that's number one. We'll talk about that more in 6 months.
May I say something on that point? No. Are you saying that your decision with respect to those priorities was a function of your capacity, lack of staff, lack of funding? So the proactive advice that you might otherwise have given some communities in their contract letting has been a casualty, really, of your inability to staff up.
Right. Now, remember, the board came forward on Tuesday and gave us the funding, so we're going to be hiring very quickly, and we're going to get right back on it. It was a tough decision. But I also get, from the county and others, where's the money? And so, we're being pulled, and we had to get to a point that, do you take the front-end casualty? Because I agree. That's what my whole approach has been, is to be as preventive as possible and help in the front end. But you get to the point in the business community that you've got to have a return on investment. And you yourself, the investigation with the money. The investigation side is not always about the money, it's about what they did. And so there's a delicate balance, but we'll be able to get back on it shortly as soon as we hire a few more people.
And so my comments are really supporting you in doing that, not being critical. I think that you're having to investigate a broad range of things, have many things to dip into because there are many things going on. But so this is by way of giving you whatever support you need to say to someone, no, we really have to do contract stuff. So that closes that question for me. This one's an easier question maybe, but you may have to report at the next 6 monthly meeting. I would like to know, just as a matter of fact, in your report, when you say we've hired employees from this, that, and the other thing, and here are what their certifications are, would you add a page or a statement about how many outside employment activities you've approved for your staff? If it's 0, 0 is great.
My stuff don't work.
I would just
okay,
like that
sure.
to be an affirmative statement so that we know what it is. It's quite often when people come from other places that they, maintain consulting contracts.
They were too many hours. In fact, I neglected to introduce. I brought some of them here that you have not met yet. The audit team now is here, and we have our intake now here as well, and some of our investigative staff. So I brought some of them. You've met some of them already, and some of them are here as well. So, and I think they can tell you too, they work very long hours. There's no such thing as a 40-hour work week in our office.
Right.
I don't think any of us could deal with having a second job. But I would definitely,
like
you're absolutely correct.
And if you have a policy to that effect, publish it so that other folks know what it is and so that it's transparent. So I rather thought they'd be a little busy. So as I said, that's a quickie. I'm asking myself whether your presentation of numbers of correspondences, let's say, is all that we need to know. Not that I want another bar chart, but it would help me to know how much time those took. So, for example, if it's 51% county, 34% municipalities on the correspondence, or let's say whatever the numbers were, does it turn out that you actually spent more time on the municipalities? I mean, the numbers may not tell us about what your investment of personnel and time is. So not today, but the next time we talk, if there's a way for you to help us understand how your time and the time of your staff is actually spent, not in real refined detail, but just as a general proposition. Yeah, it's 34% municipalities, but we actually spend 70% of our time on it, or something.
We can do a sampling because it starts from that phone call, which we actually do, monitor some of that. So we can try to do a sampling of that, sure.
If it's not possible, that's fine too, but I just find myself just dealing with raw numbers doesn't help me understand the way that you're spread.
Yeah, we'll try to do a sampling. It's going to be a little tough, but we'll try.
So those are my questions and comments, and they're not meant to be critical, but just to, as we move forward, we'll think of other questions that we want to know the answer to. So thank you very much for your report.
Okay. Mr. Franz?
Commissioner, General Steckler, again, excuse my voice. I want to restate Chairman Rogers and Commissioner Fiore's statements of how supportive we are. We, on the IG Oversight Committee, take our function very seriously, as you do your job. And please don't take the questions as meddling. But I like Commissioner Fiore, am hoping for more information, maybe more detailed. For instance, it would help us and accordingly help the community if we knew of the reports that you gave us, how many were arose from front-end contract review, back-end contract review, or were referrals from another municipality. For instance, I think you stated that the paving SBE was a Palm Beach County referral. I think you also stated there was a referral from Loxahatchee Groves. It would help us
Okay.
and the community as a whole to know whether these reports, these final reports that are issued, this actions taken by yourself or the state attorney or whomever, where those came from.
They are in the report themselves online, but on the presentation, I can certainly do that for the perception here.
I looked through the annual report, and I saw that in one instance, it did say it was county referral, but I didn't see for the other reports. So it would help us figure out what's going on.
Okay.
And I make that statement cautiously, because the last thing I want to do, and I think I speak for everyone on the dais, is micromanage the office. The way this is structured, we are an oversight committee, not a management committee, and we don't want to tell you how to do it. But we'd like to, at least I think my function is to share with you what I think would be appropriate for your office to do, just as Commissioner Fiore shared with you what she thought would be appropriate.
Absolutely.
And then obviously take that all back, speak with your staff, figure out what's the best way to implement the will of the people. So that type of information, the same concern I had with Dr. Fiore on the telephone calls, that doesn't tell me 972 calls. It doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of behind that. We can drill that down.
Well, I would like to know from those 972 calls things such as, did that result in an eventual report? Because if it turns out that somehow that's draining your resources, then I think some appropriate action needs to be taken at the county commission level, where you have the funding and the support to do your job. But if it's 972 calls that are, I really hate this person was really rude to me at this particular department of this particular government, and you really need to investigate that, then we need to know that too. If it's, for lack of a better phrase, frivolous, we need to know that. It's important to me to know how long it takes to take care of those inquiries in terms of and I take it from the system that you have implemented, and please, if you have an opportunity during the presentation, explain to me, because I think there are now 2 systems you have in place. Is it, I saw it referred to a couple places as IGMIS and a couple places.
We're merging everything into one system. That's going to be hopefully next month.
One was already online, the other was coming online, is what I understood, and it's going to be one system. And apparently every call that comes in is logged into one of the 2 systems, or maybe both.
Only the investigative side of the calls are logged in. The rest of the staff's, no. Investigations is the intake, so only the citizen calls are logged in, not any other internal calls or anything like that. This is just purely outside calls coming in, whether it be the hotline or the other, and there was no separation of that number. We're going to be separating that number.
Okay.
So.
It's helpful, again, for us as the Oversight Committee to know once an investigation is initiated, for lack of a better phrase, how does it get to the back end and how long it takes to get to the back end. Again, if the concern is from your end, look, I don't have enough bodies for this, or there's some procedures that are stopping me from getting this job done, we need to know that, and the citizens need to know that. But that would be helpful for us as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Harbison, you through? Mr. Cloud?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things. To add to what's already been said by Commissioner Farash, I do think the setting forth the referral sources would be helpful in a number of ways, helpful to us, but also helpful to citizens, perhaps as a measure or benchmark as to the degree that municipalities in the county may be cooperating and embracing the whole infrastructure that's been created. It may be, they may not be getting enough credit, in other words, for the extent to which they're supporting your activities. And so it may well help them come to a decision about that if they had that data available. The other thing I wanted to clarify, let me state this by saying that I'm a forensic CPA. My training has always been as in the area of forensics and things such as that. I'm not an auditor, government auditor, nor am I an inspector general. Do I hold those certifications? But it's always been my understanding that, you know, just because you're a CPA doesn't make you a forensic CPA. Those are different disciplines and skills. And it's always been my understanding and belief that the role and the skill sets of an internal auditor, for a government internal auditor, wherever they may exist, is quite a different function and skill set from being an auditor in an inspector general capacity. And for my benefit and for the benefit of those who may be confused in thinking that those roles are duplicative or redundant, I'd like you to give me your impression as to whether, while they may be subject to the same auditing standards, I understand, I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Okay. And you're correct. They are subject to saying there's either a yellow book and or red book that most auditors go under. You know, I think the first difference clearly is the independence issue, where an internal auditor typically is inside. So that person reports to whether it be an agency, a board, an audit committee. And so what drives that then is their annual risk assessment. They'll survey that enterprise, and besides looking at budget and their past findings, their risk really comes from internal and management. Different in an IG's office, our risk really comes from our open complaints investigations. It comes from us being out and observing. We have where an internal auditor has to do an annual audit plan and pretty much stays focused to that audit plan. An IG is much more flexible, where we can go and do wherever the high risk areas for that day, month, year happen to be. It's really, internal auditing is a very different, I mean, you can have performance auditors, you can have compliance auditors, you can have forensic auditors. It just depends on, and financial auditors, it depends on the focus of that internal audit shop. And so if the focus is on compliance and some performance auditing, they don't dig down to a level where an inspector general would dig down to from a forensic standpoint of a very in-depth review. They'll do much more random sampling and things like that. So it just is a matter of how the office is functioned and structured can drive. The difference here is that an internal auditor from any shop, whether it's municipality or the county, only has that jurisdiction. For this office of the Inspector General, we have an enterprise approach because we have 42 jurisdictions, and so we can reach out and try to find audits that will help multiple entities as opposed to an internal auditor that can only help within that entity. But a lot of what drives in-house is what in-house wants, as opposed to what drives us is your risk areas and things that we see and that's coming into our office. And further, an auditor in-house doesn't have the investigative abilities typically to do investigations where the IG's office does. So it immediately, those two work together.
Well, independence is a cornerstone in public accounting, not only for auditors, but for all those certified in that area. I mean, I think in every firm that I've ever been involved in, whether there's an audit, there's always a conflict. You know, you can't be a shareholder or in any way related to the entity that the firm has accepted an audit for. So that is a very closely guarded covenant within the profession. And so what I hear you're saying is that while there are standards and maybe standards of even independence, when the person that you're reporting to has the ability to, you know, tell you how to do your work, you lack independence.
That's one avenue, but also typically in that environment, that entity approves that work plan.
Yeah.
Where in our environment.
So they're
owners-
basically stating the objectives and the goals. So if they want to under-investigate and yet do an audit for dressing to look like, you know, like as though the work was done, then the other thing I would venture to guess is that the fact that your office contains forensic analysts of varying types and skill sets, that an auditor, while the objective of a contract audit or something may not be to look for fraud. I mean, I guess that there's nevertheless a degree of cross-pollination that exists between those functions. Even a certified audit in the commercial world, it says right in the opinion letter, is not designed to uncover fraud. They get sued for it all the time and typically lose because people expect that, but that's really not the function of an audit. I mean, if it happens, it happens, but it's a different engagement to go looking for fraud, and there are different methodologies used to do it. So just for purposes of, you know, educating the public, I'd like to say that, and even in your case, if you were doing an audit where discovering fraud or something may not be your primary objective, I do think that the cross-pollination of your staff it puts you in a better position to do that than anyone else. Do you agree? I'm asking.
It depends on the environment, but typically yes, but some audit shops may have a forensic inside, so it's hard to say. It just depends on the talent that's in that particular department.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay, Ms. Hollett?
I just commend you on what you've done, starting from zero and where you are now. But I imagine with that comes growing pains, and I would be curious to know what has been your greatest learning lesson.
My greatest lesson? You know, if there was a will to be able to hire more rapidly and audit, you know, I would have preferred to bring the audit up shop sooner. And so the lesson is, in one hand you want to bring it up, but in the other hand you want qualified people. So there was a struggle there, I think, on bringing in the right people. That was probably the toughest part of this in starting up this office. There's many lessons along the way. Sometimes you bring in the right people, sometimes you don't. So there's lots of lessons there.
Thanks. One other thing. On this issue about the proactive nature, I must say, reading everything, and probably some of this goes into your next section with the strategic plan, but, you know, I think in my business, I obviously am involved in defending folks, but work very hard at prevention, and I often say, I hope I'll be out of business someday. And I wonder if there is some thinking on your part as to, clearly you're understaffed at this point and, you know, there's lots more to do, but that if you are successful, the future actually holds a smaller IG office and less activities.
You know, you never know, because if there's more entities, there'll always be some size staff. I mean, I think sometimes people are always going to, there are people that are going to do the wrong thing. I actually think when government begins to understand the role of the Inspector General and begins to utilize it, that there actually could be more, but it would be more on the prevention side rather than the after effects. So whether there'll be more or less resources, I think there'd be more of a shift to the prevention side more often, where maybe there'd be less things. I mean, the goal is that if you've got internal control set in place, you'll have less fraud and less problems. And so, you know, it really just, you know, that shift can happen. That's what you hope to happen. You hope to change the culture and shift that whole, you know, that lack of policies and controls to a strengthened environment where people can't take advantage of it.
Okay.
Thank you. A couple quick questions. The funding that was allocated, the supplemental gap funding by the BCC 2 days ago, is there a requirement that that gets recaptured from the municipalities at the end of the litigation period, or if the county prevails? I mean, was there any strings attached to the $400,000?
I think they left it more, and I know Lenny, I think Lenny's still here, I think they left it more that they're going to try some options, whether it be interlocal agreements or other options first on how to recoup the money. But there wasn't really, I think some of the commissioners wanted to seek that, but I don't think there's really a strong answer there of what will happen with that $400,000. It's all contingent upon their settlement or their going to court.
And so that $400,000 is to October 1st.
September 30th, yeah, right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
When you went before the Board of County Commissioners, and your slide talks about a 1/4% baseline versus your requested amount of 0.18%, was that pre-litigation or post-litigation?
That was before.
That was before.
Yeah, we did that in May, around May last year.
Does the $400,000 bring you up to what would otherwise be the baseline, or are you still below it?
No, we're still below it.
The number of calls was a subject of a question. I mean, I took that as there's the quantifiable or the quantitative part of it and how much time is allocated for that activity. I took it one step sort of more general, is that you have 1,000 folks that are calling and making inquiries, so that there's a value to having an open front door without prejudging the merits or I think it's valuable to know how you allocate that time, but I don't want to lose the message that there is value in having a mechanism that's accepted, that's there, that's stable, and that allows people to make referrals, because you'll never know out of 1,000 if 10 cut to it and are regarding serious misconduct or programs or something that leads to $10 million of savings, it's worth the overall investment of time. And I also wanted to end on the comment that in terms of prioritization, I think I've never disagreed with the idea that prevention and oversight and being there as a resource for covered entities is in some ways your number one goal and priority. I would say that it is not an either-or proposition, so that when you prioritize activities, I still would look to you as sort of a referral source. If you refer something to me, General Steckler, as a potential criminal matter, you then step out of it until we make that determination. So in some ways, it's a very efficient method, and those referrals, when they go to a prosecution, then you act as a pipeline. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Besides, I would agree with the number of calls. I think I've had a great number of 1,000 calls. And you can have one person who calls 1,000 times. It's a lot of the problems that she has, but you never know when the wolf is really there and when the wolf isn't there. So a lot of the time is used for that. The only question I have is, do the cities still have a requirement to have a balanced budget submitted to Tallahassee? And if so, are your audits sufficient to increase the credibility of acceptance from the State Department on their yearly budgets?
Joe, do you have any?
Our audits would not be financial audits, that the entities would be submitting with theirs. They would submit an annual financial report to the state that would be independently audited by their CPA. A completely separate function than what we do.
None of the functions that you carry out there would give any credibility to their audit?
Not to their financial audit, no.
Okay. All right. I guess we can move on to the next section.
I might add, if I may, Judge, that might be another indication of a distinction between the role that an internal auditor might play in preparing the financial records for the outside auditors. It's just typically a function of an internal auditor is to arrange the bookkeeping, for lack of a better word, to degree that the outside auditors actually have something that's workable. Otherwise, the audit fees by outside auditors just may be outlandish compared to what they presently are. That's another distinction between the role of an internal auditor and what you might do.
And single audit 133 too, you're correct, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Stickler?
Okay, I'm going to really do this high level because this is on the internet and you all have a copy and I don't want to keep you here all afternoon. But to kind of take you through, we went ahead and had our internal strategic meeting in November and we came up with 4 program goals and strategies. Thank you, that's better. And we have put that on the website. The actual goals, the 4 goals that the staff are all in concert with is that we will conduct independent audits, investigations, and reviews that detect, deter, prevent fraud, waste, mismanagement. This is pretty much our mission statement in the ordinance. The second goal is to maintain a high-quality, effective, and objective organization. We take pride in the staff we have. The third one is that we're going to give them the support and direction that they need to achieve the OIG overall mission. And lastly, this is really the key one, which reaches out to the public, is to inform and educate all individuals that are affected by our role and entities and how they can benefit from them. We're going to be spending a lot of time on Goal 4. I'm going to take you through another meeting that we had regarding the marketing part of that. If you would like, I can take you through each of the strategies and each of the goals, but it's your call. It's all online and the website. It's lengthy though. Certainly your call. I can go through each one of these, or we can bypass all this and you can read it on the website.
Okay.
Agreed.
It's what you gave us before, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
it's in your packet and it's in the strategic plan. And this actual presentation, as soon as we get back to the office, will be online as well. So everybody will get this.
I can tell you that I've read it. I'm sure everybody else has as well.
Okay. And we will go through the 4 goals. And this is the key. We hear a lot about prevention and reform, and the 6 pillars comes into place here. And we decided that we really needed to embark on trying to figure out how do we measure, because this is not easy to measure. And it's not just the IG's role to measure this. This is really the community's role to measure this. And so our 2 main questions are, how are we going to, as a community, measure the positive shift of our culture? And how do we engage stakeholders to champion those results? And so we wound up actually hosting a stakeholders meeting with about 10 individuals. David Baker actually facilitated it for us. And these were individuals from the business community and others, and we can provide you the list of who was all there. There were 10 individuals, all that are very engaged in this process. All new members, not our typical, other than David and Marty, there were all new members at that table. And really from the business sense model, we wanted to have people that knew how to measure. And so those are the individuals that were brought to the table. And the goal is to develop some sort of implementation plan and to follow up. And a great word was used at the table, it was champions, that we really as a community need champions, and not just ethics reform, but we actually need people who want to champion this. And we hear a lot of times people want to volunteer, and this may be a great role where they can fit. The discussion points really focused on, and I found this very interesting because, especially in the economic development community, where we keep hearing return on investment, they actually said that the focus needs to be on the reform rather than just the dollars recovered, that it's really about, and I think we've seen it in the paper now, we really need to be able to talk about how the culture is starting to change here in Palm Beach County. We talked about, how do we promote the value added to the sectors of the academia and the business community. We want to try to find a way to actually track best practice and report on best practices, and not necessarily our office, but the stakeholders, the Economic Forum and others. How did they help report out best practices? And then again, to be able to bring it out and globally for all aspects of this county. Let me go back. So the key here is we're going to, and I'm going to show you in a second, as a result of that meeting, we're brainstorming so much that we agreed that we're going to meet again in March. And this is kind of, we're going to kind of try it, whether it be quarterly or every 6 months, because these are people in the business world that are very busy. But they're committed to trying to figure out how to measure ethics reform. They're members of the Six Pillars as well. And so we're going to try to continue that process, and we'll be bringing forward more and more of some of the things that we're able to do and how we're going to be able to try to measure. But I'm going to show you something very, very neat here on the website. We're going to, I think, go live this afternoon on this. One of the things that came out of that is to be able to have a dashboard. And so we've created a dashboard. Jeff, can you drive it a little bit? We create a dashboard here where from inception to, from the day the office opened, and this will be done and uploaded quarterly, but from that moment, we'll be able to have the dollar figure out there on question costs so the whole world can see what we're doing here in this county. But we'll have the question identified recovery costs, the costs coming in, and the correspondences. And then first, before we get into the details, down at the very bottom, we actually found a Google site that you can select any language, and all you got to do is click on it, and it automatically changes the entire website into that language. So we've added that now, which is a very nice feature. And then let's drill down first into, if you can, back to English. Thank you. Go ahead and begin to drill down the question costs. What we do is that will tell you what it means so that everybody can understand what does it mean as a question cost and identify cost. The correspondences will tell you what that actually means. And then if you want the details, it then begins to drill down. And what we're doing is we're doing it by fiscal year, trends to date. And then you can keep drilling down. Just go ahead and pick this sheet, yeah. You can keep drilling down to show the market, to show the trends as to, you know, how many are coming in from the cities, how many are coming in, and then we can break it down, which municipalities. So you can keep breaking down where things are happening, what we're receiving in our office. So that begins to be transparent as to what exactly is going and how the trends will shift over time. And you know what, if it shifts up in a particular municipality, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That means that people are engaged in the process and are reporting. So we're going to kind of start with this as a first, you know, as a trend line and see what happens. And we're going to be working with the stakeholders and others to see if there's improvements we can over time make to this, because I'm sure there will be, and probably more data later.
Is there a way for you to add your 2 postage stamps? Because I think that's a nice visual or a nice metaphor for people to understand.
Sure. Great suggestion.
That looks great. Very impressive.
So one of the major strategic goals is to continue to improve our outreach to the citizens so they know what's happening. And this is one method we can do that in.
Okay, you complete your report?
I'm almost done. I only have a couple more
Well,
slides.
just give it a couple minutes, let it finish, and then we'll go to the questions.
Almost done. This system, we're going to be merging into one system, hopefully in March. The majority of it will be done. We still have a lot of add-ons and things, but the meat of the systems, we're merging now all into one system. So depending on what unit you're in, you now be logging into one system and into your unit, which will make it a lot easier for the office. Great news, on February 23rd, we'll be going in front of the Commission for Florida Association of Law Enforcement Accreditation. We anticipate our being accredited. Of course, we're not until they say yes, but we had a great on-site, and we're looking forward to the report that will go. We will also release that report on our website as soon as we receive the final copy and are able to. We now are going to continue to hire qualified staff since the Board of County Commission was gracious enough to step in on Tuesday night. And we are going to continue to be responsive to those that we can within the budget constraints that we have. So far, the municipalities have linked to our website. We are beginning in the county to have a formalized process where we now have a piece of their leadership group. We go in and speak for 15 minutes. We've created pamphlets. We are almost done creating our posters to get out into the community of the municipalities as well as the county to start to educate people on how to report waste, fraud, and abuse and whistleblower and things like that. We're going to be doing a film as well, probably a half-hour presentation for Channel 20, or not even Channel 20, but that they can actually utilize for onboard the municipalities, because I can't be everywhere at everybody. So we're like, we need to tape this. So we're going to tape probably a half-hour, maybe even 15 minutes, just depends, kind of presentation on the overall, what the IG does, the office does. And then we've asked the county, and they've agreed to give us time each quarter to have an actual hour or so class on the Office of Inspector General, so employees can voluntarily come to the class if they want to learn about our office. And now, Mr. Chair?
Now we'll go for the questions. Let's start down there with Mr. McLaughlin.
Cheryl,
Yes.
what would you consider the biggest threat in the next sort of time period, 6 months, to your operation and effectiveness?
The budget.
Okay, Ms. Howard. Ms. Howard? Okay, Ms. Robertson?
I'd like to commend you, first of all, for your outreach to the community stakeholders and soliciting their input and feedback. I think that the more that the community can be involved in setting your course. There are a lot of just great thought leaders in the community, and they're a big resource, and I'm happy, frankly, that they're volunteering and responding to your requests as well. I would like to point out that I personally believe that, as I forget which commissioner mentioned it, that the country is watching. And our whole infrastructure is award-winning, as we all know, from the National Association of Counties, and that even the request for you as a speaker before national associations, I believe the National Association of Inspector Generals, you were keynote speaker perhaps there, and then again you have an upcoming speech to the National Association of
Local government auditors, yeah.
Government auditors, are all evidence of the fact that people recognize what has been done in Palm Beach County to improve governance. And I guess it's always good to see the other end of that spectrum when you look at other ethics initiatives in other cities, such as what I read in the paper currently taking place in Jacksonville, where the new mayor is attempting to cut the legs out from under that infrastructure by attacking the funding mechanisms there. One of my clients pointed out to me once, he used a phrase that I really liked. He said, I may have been born at night, but it just wasn't last night. So I think that the community needs to be very involved in their own oversight, and such as they were at the BCC meeting last night, or night before last. Tuesday. We can't afford to have ethics fatigue within our citizenry, and I'd just like to commend you on your community outreach. I do think that's important in that regard, because if we lose the support of the community, this will crumble, I think, overnight. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, Mr. Fraud? Doctor?
Just a couple of things. Congratulations on your progress. I hope folks not in this room watching or reading about this understand what an accomplishment it is to have come this far in so short a time. I think they'll have models to look at where they can see that you've achieved a 5-year in 18 months kind of thing, especially with the accreditation. So I'm thrilled. As a person who has to explain regularly what ethics contributes to the bottom line, and I fail regularly, I might add, because no, we can't prove that it makes people better. No, what we can prove is that people understand the importance of it, or that they take it seriously by looking at their policies or looking at their activities. But the idea of there being a bottom line for it, I think, is a misunderstanding of what ethics is. So I understand that you're under pressure for return on investment. I'm glad to see that you have some support now from the community for some other measures. I think your champions and your stakeholders meeting is a fabulous invention. I would hope when you have time, probably not this year, but when you have time, if you could sort of clone that process for non-business groups, maybe take it out into areas of the community that really are not connected to this process on an immediate basis in the way that people who actually have a problem have been connected to the Inspector General's office. I mean, because one of our outreach goals is to build a larger culture of ethics, and that's not your job, but I think you have a successful model for something that could be used with other groups just to draw them into the project or make them feel part of the project. Obviously, doing it in other languages on your website is a fabulous thing to do. So that comment is just to encourage that model to be shared. Other community groups may want to borrow it or, you know, borrow some of the business leaders that you've used, not necessarily the Inspector General, but maybe those business leaders could do the cloning part for you and be your ambassadors. So I'm not saying you yourself or your office do it, but I think that it's such a good idea. Let's use it elsewhere. My other question has to do with a threat that has been voiced, and I don't know if it's real or if it's gossip or it's hysteria, but it has been said that well, you're doing auditing and you're doing contract oversight, and so we don't really need this or that county or municipal function anymore, and we can save those budget dollars by not having those people, you know, getting rid of those jobs or those functions. We'll let the Inspector General do it. So I'm a little concerned when you say we got a referral from the county or we got a referral from the municipality. I wonder if those are referrals to you because that function or activity has disappeared. Do you see that as a threat coming down the line in your strategic plan? Are you replacing functions that should rightly be part of other entities?
The referrals that we get traditionally are criminal type referrals or thefts and things like that. So no, in the sense of that type. I think the issue here is, you're correct, there are some that think because we have an audit function that they don't need theirs. You know, every organization needs an internal audit function. One, they live and breathe it every day, but again, we're looking from an enterprise perspective, like OpenSky. That's a great example where we're not paying attention to just one, you know, we don't have one boss, and we have lots of people that we're overseeing. So we wouldn't be able to add the value in-house that an internal auditor adds in the sense of, you know, here's the checks and balances for the next 5 years, go forth. We are much more, again, as the forensic side of the house, where we're, in a way, looking for fraud, and we're looking for answers for government when they're taken advantage of, and if we can cross-sector it, like, again, the OpenSky audit, or a purchasing card audit. If a purchasing card audit is happening in one municipality, more than likely, there's probably a trend there in some of the others where we can help build the internal controls across boundaries. So, you know, I hope that doesn't happen, because if they were to bring in the internal audit function, the resources have to come with it. We couldn't possibly take over an entity that has had an existing internal audit function with 5-10 people. Right now, we've only had one county audit.
I mean, there's, if I may, there are.
Just on the same thing here.
Yes, on the same. There, in the audit world, there are lots of different types of audits from financial to compliance, and it's not just one word. There are many audit functions, and some are appropriate for different places. That's, I think, what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
General Steck, I was not going to comment because I view us as oversight, not management, and I don't want to step too much into telling you what to do. But I think it's worthwhile, from hearing the other commissioners speak, that there's some good thoughts being presented to your office, at least from one person's perspective, and in reviewing all your materials, which are very nice. Thank you. It seems that there's three things that your office should probably inform us and the citizens about. I like the increased transparency. I think that's absolutely crucial for your office. And I recognize that with certain areas of your office, it's impossible. Obviously, you're not going to have transparency on whistleblower stuff. It's just not going to happen. But in all other functions of your office, I think the citizens are asking for it. I think they should get as much transparency as is possible, including putting stuff up on the website and news releases several weeks beforehand, whenever everything's going to be done or said or action taken. I reviewed your materials several times, and I reviewed all your reports. I like them, they're nice, but I'm trying to draw from them, and I wanted to hear your presentation today to see if I could draw from them an overall vision for your office. And this is in the oversight role. I want to make sure that the IG's office succeeds. And toward that end, it would help me in my oversight role if we knew what the overall vision of the office was. Is it going to focus more on front-end contracting, as Commissioner Fiore spoke about? Is it going to be more on, say, an audit function, as Commissioner Harbison spoke about? Is it going to be more criminal-based, as Commissioner McAuliffe spoke about? I purposefully have held off asking this question until you actually had some time to actually get your feet wet in the office. But perhaps you can come back to us, or maybe you can answer the question now. Is there an overall vision for the office? Obviously, every IG's office is responsive to the community that it serves. In an IG office in Palm Beach County would probably not work the same way as it would in other municipalities in the state, or other municipalities or counties throughout the entire country. So I'm trying to see if I can get a sense. If you can tell us right now, that's fine. If you can and you want to sort of hold off until the next meeting, that'd be fine too, but sort of an overall vision.
Well, our overall vision is to enhance public trust in government.
Well, I understand, but
however,
that's nice, but those are just words. I mean,
well, but they mean something in the sense that.
Well, I understand, but a little bit more than that. Are we going to focus on any one of these areas, or?
There is not a one-size-fits-all. In some municipalities or entities we oversee, they may need strong audit and controls put in place. In some areas of where we go, they may do a lot of contracting and are having lots of problems in that arena. In another arena, or people come forward with criminal allegations, that's going to go, and so you can't just say it's going to be only audit or only, you can't, and you have to, over time, learn your environment and what comes in. A lot of what we get will begin to formulate whether we have more audit heavy, more investigative. When I first got here, I thought it was going to be all investigations. After everything that happened here, and everybody wanted everybody taken down, I had an org chart that was very heavy in investigations. Well, now I have an org chart that is balanced more over on the audit and contract side. In many of the municipalities, they do not have an audit function other than your CPA. They have very little audit functions, so there's great need for controls for them to have put in place. In other areas, they do a lot of contracting, and the goal is, again, prevention, to stop, help avoid bid protests. All that costs money. And again, it's hard to measure what we stop, but that's another, there's a combination. You can't just say it's just one. An inspector general does all. It does audit, it does investigation. There's not a formula out there that there's only 10% here. A lot of it is what people bring forward.
And that's very helpful in the sense that you have sort of told us what your initial vision was, and as you got your feet wet and the office got up and running, that vision has changed. And perhaps you can tell us, going forward, I see the audit role, the front-end audit role, growing. I see it decreasing. We need to know, so we can be your supporters, as to what it is that's out there. Because obviously, we're not out there taking care of all these particular issues. You are. We need to know if that function is changing from one area to another, as it has, apparently. Why it's changing, or how it's changing, or if there's different needs for your office, or different obstacles, how that's changing. I didn't know that the function of the office had shifted that dramatically, but that's good to hear, because the office has to be responsive to the problems. But if the structure is such that, because, say, for instance, the county has an internal auditor, so we don't need as much audit function there as we may in some of the municipalities. Tell us that. That's the sort of vision that I would like to have going forward. And then my final point is, it would help me if we sort of knew what you envision costs going forward. I saw several places the costs that run through the different local governments here in Palm Beach County. If my math is correct, it's approximately $10 billion. When you factor in county government budget and the budgets of all municipalities, that's approximately $10 billion. It seems to me, and I'm not an auditor as is, or excuse me, a CPA as is Commissioner Harbison, so I don't know exactly how it works from your end, but it seems to me to fully cover that waterfront, $10 billion, you're not talking a staff of 20 as you presently have, or a staff of 32. It seems like you're talking about a much larger staff. So I guess the third question ties into the second question as to the vision, because if the vision doesn't line up with the cost, then we need to talk about it and figure out a way to make them line up so that you can do your job. So those are a lot of tough questions, and the intent is not to put you on a hot seat, but the intent is to give you a thought of how at least one person thinks, so you can take that information from myself and Chairman Rogers, Commissioner Fiore, and Commissioner McAuliffe and Harbison, and sort of synthesize that and perhaps give us an idea on some of those questions.
I can tell you that when I got here, my goal was to start small and to see what we needed, and to not hire quickly, which we didn't do, and to understand the universe. When we wound up with the municipalities, we took pretty much looked at what the functions and all the programs and all the things they had, and my hope and goal is for a while we don't plan on growing past the 32 that we have or will have for the counties and municipalities. The office, unfortunately, or fortunately, however one looks at it, the budget grows and the people grow because we have contracts. We have Solid Waste Authority. We have Children's Service Council. We now have Healthcare District. So unfortunately, it's getting lumped into one large budget with a lot of people, but there's a lot of jurisdiction going on here. But the goal is, for now, unless a lot of people all of a sudden start reporting like there's no tomorrow and we can't keep up, I don't see that. I've been here a year and a half. I'm seeing a steady pace in the county, and we're starting to see some trends in the municipalities. The goal is to just hire what we need, and then over time, if the workload justifies it, then we'll go from there. But this is where we're staying for hopefully for quite some time.
And with regard to question 2, sort of the focus, and I didn't do a very good job of explaining my question. That's my fault. But do you see it as there not being one focus, or as you said, there's different needs for different situations? Is that pretty much
I think
what
we need
have?
to be flexible. There are different needs for everyone that we have jurisdiction under. And again, some just need front-end needs, and we'll probably never have possibly never have a complaint on them. So I believe, and that's the beauty of the Inspector General's office, it's the flexibility to be able to react to a circumstance if we need to, and to assist and be preventative. Part of that mission, be prevent and detect, is to get in ahead of time. So I believe the Inspector General's office needs to be flexible to address all aspects of that.
You've answered my question. Thanks.
Okay.
Just, Mr. Chair, a question, and one, I don't think we've, in the audience, Mr. Chair, there are several important people to this ethics reform process that I think the record should reflect are in attendance and have the level of commitment to be here and listen to these activities. One is Jeff Santa Maria, County Commissioner, who's been a champion of these reforms and continues to be extremely supportive of the Inspector General's office and the Ethics Commission. So, Commissioner, thank you for being here. Richard Radcliffe is the Executive Director of the League of Cities, and your involvement in continuing commitment to being a good partner with the IG's office, with the Ethics Commission, seems to me to be, I really think it's a positive thing that you're here listening, absorbing, and being able to work with the other partners and stakeholders. And Al Johnson, the Executive Director of the Ethics Commission, is here, another important player in these ethics reforms. So my question to you, are really a request. This is my last meeting of the IG committee as the state attorney. I will continue to support you and your efforts in the private citizen capacity. But I'll say my legacy is bound up, I think, in your performance. So do well.
I'll do my best.
No pressure.
I think what I'd like to say to you is that we're doing a good job. You have a tough job because everybody expects accountability. And in dealing with things like this, you can no more account for progress in this matter than you can for how many teeth you can stop from decaying by flossing. It just can't be done. And we just have to eat it like eat elephant, one bite at a time. And we are doing something because all of these things that we're doing, contrary to the Forbes report, they have an effect upon foreclosures. They have an effect upon abuse, social abuse. They have an effect upon unemployment. So you're touching every facet of our life. And as I said earlier, we have to try to change attitudes because greed is infectious and its treatment is slow. So I want to say that I think you're working on the right way. My only question would be here is there anything that the Commission on Ethics could do to assist in keeping the expenses down?
IG Oversight Committee.
Huh?
The IG Oversight Committee.
Yeah. No, my question is about education, in your lectures and things. Aren't there, it looks like there, or maybe I should ask you, is there any duplicity of services rendered by the IG Committee and the Commission on Ethics? Because at one time, I think Mr. Johnson was doing a lot of talking, educational things and like that, whereas we perhaps could, that committee, and I say we because I'm schizophrenic head of both of them, maybe we could do something to keep your expenses down somewhat, at least in the part of education. And, that's not anything that's wasted. The more education and more information that you can give, people are inclined to be suspicious of things that they don't understand.
We certainly partner where we can. I know Ellen and I have tried real hard to separate our entities so people understand it. I think we're trying so hard to help people understand that these are, because they were created at the same time, everybody thinks this is the same thing. And so we've worked real hard to try to separate ourselves in the sense only of explaining our offices. In time, hopefully that will get more and more of the education where we can do, and we do partnering now anyway. We speak together. We have this, some of our brochures and stuff are together. So we do where we can. We merge together. And our stakeholders and all that do that on a volunteer basis. So there's really no cost. And when I speak, we do weekends, nights, and whenever. So we don't have a lot of cost engaged in marketing. The county's been great with their public affairs and helping us. So, but I think there's always that ability. We have to be careful because we can't accept anything from outside entities. So we're sort of have to be careful, about that. But right now the marketing is a lot on the internet, and posters will be the biggest thing. And hopefully that won't be a great burden and on that.
And do you meet with other groups in the state who are in this business of ethics?
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I'm a little confused where we are on the agenda. Are we about to?
We're finishing my presentation.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a couple last quick questions. One is I want to reiterate what Commissioner Farash has said. I don't believe it's our role to micromanage, and I would never want to be perceived in doing that. However, I would want to point out to the public that you have invited us to come by and see you. You certainly have invited me, and I understand that you've made that overture to others. And perhaps we're going to get to some of this in the agenda items, but I would like to perhaps individually get together with you, and I don't want it to be perceived as meddling or micromanaging, but to discuss some of these policies and things, because I think I need some time to think through them and really sort of process what I think from a policy standpoint the results might be. So I intend to follow up individually to help you educate me, so we can have a dialogue about some of these things as we go forward between now and the next meeting. The next thing, and maybe this is premature, but I've heard, I think maybe you said that, or someone say that part of the problem in the county with the municipalities is that some of the municipalities don't even know how many contracts they have. You've had difficulty in inventorying these outside contracts, and if that's the case, you can respond to that. But if that's the case, how in the world do you expect to obtain your funding where there's a missing variable in the equation?
The county is going to be responsible for that piece of it, but yes, we've had difficulty.
I mean, if you're getting a percentage of a contract and they don't know how many contracts have, it seems to me there's some contingency associated with your getting the money you need to operate your office.
I mean, there will be if they can't account for their 100% contracts, yes.
Right, and that's, if I may, that was a discussion that was made at the drafting committee meeting, and that was the reason they went with the LOGR system. Mm-hmm. And the LOGR system is a representation of each entity's annual financial report. And in the general slide, she had a number of $10 billion budgets. That was all budget. That's not the same as what's reported in LOGR, because LOGR is the actual expenditures. So there is a difference there. The LOGR expenditures were, I think, $1.6 billion. So of their $10 billion budget, $1.6 billion was LOGR activity that was eligible or was used to determine that funding base. So there is a difference between the total budget and the LOGR system. And the reason they went with the LOGR system, because that's the only known uniform system of collecting expense data. None of the entities, there's no way to do an apples-to-apples comparison, or there's no reliable data on which we could determine what the funding base would be, or on which the county, my understanding is that the county could prorate each entity's share of the IG cost. So that's why they went with the LOGR information. At the time, which was less than a year ago, and I was on the subcommittee, there was no known mechanism to report contract activity.
And everyone had an opportunity to input at that time. Is that correct?
That's
is that
correct.
An acronym, by the way, or is that somebody's name?
LOGR is it's a web-based local government reporting system.
So it's an established reporting methodology.
It is. The state requires each entity report their annual financial report through the LOGR system. It's required
and so
by
the
statute.
state doesn't require each municipality to inventory their contracts.
Doesn't.
No,
Not
so
to my
there's
knowledge.
no, okay.
Yeah.
So that explains a lot. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, this looks like it might be a good time to take a little 15-minute break so everybody can get their thoughts together. So we'll take a break for about 15 minutes at this time. All right, I think we're ready to get started. Clerk, would you please call the roll, see who is here?
Commissioner Edward Rogers.
Here.
Commissioner Manuel Farag.
Here.
Commissioner Robin Fiore.
Present.
Commissioner Ronald Harbison.
Here.
Commissioner Bruce Reinhardt. State Attorney Michael McAuliffe. Here. Public Defender Kerry Howitt.
All right, Mrs. Howard had to leave early, and Mr. Reinhardt will be in today. Okay, the commission is back in session, and we'll ask Mrs. Steckler if she will finish her presentation at this time.
Thank you, Mr.
Do
Chair.
we have any more questions for her before we went back? Okay.
And
Just wrap up.
Just in closing, I just want to thank you all, and I welcome your feedback, just like we do every citizen in this county. And please, I will continue to offer individually for you all to come to our office and see how we are functioning, what we're doing. But your feedback is incredibly important. It is not overstepping boundaries at all. I appreciate it, and we will take these recommendations and implement them, as many as we can, and try to bring back what you're requesting.
Well, what are we going to do as far as the meeting on the procedural thing?
Well, we could, if you would like, we can wait until the next meeting and then
Okay.
find the minutes, because I know you specifically brought it up and requested it, and it was important, so.
I'm concerned about,
Yeah, so we can
sunshine.
just wait. Yeah, we can just wait,
okay.
and do
that's
that
my
in the
biggest
August meeting.
concern.
And will you or your CA set that meeting up?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the things I'd like to discuss with you one-on-one anyway.
Okay, no problem.
Process my own.
No problem.
All right, then the next thing on the agenda is the municipal county lawsuit. Is that still on the agenda? Any report on that?
It was just somebody on the commission asked for that to be on the agenda through Alan, so we put it on the agenda.
Anybody want to be heard on that?
I would like an update
Okay.
from Mr. Berger, who's not here, right? No, he is here.
Mr. Berger? Okay.
Sorry, he moved.
Try to fade away into the background.
If you're not the appropriate person, that would be, fine.
Would like to have an update on the status. of
That's
the-
never stopped me before. Thank you. We are working towards settlement negotiations, which we're very close. And, the two largest parts are amending the ordinance and going forward, and also figuring out the possibility of getting some amount of money from the cities, in terms of recouping what we've lost during this year. We will plan, if all goes well, we should have at least a draft ordinance amendment fairly well tied up by next week, and we have distributed to all the players. And then hopefully get it in front of the county commission once we get feedback from the cities as to what they might be willing to do in terms of the amount of money that would be due for the rest of this fiscal year. So we're hopeful for that. We still have, there is a statutory process that's required when local governments sue each other, and we have begun that because we must, and we have a date set aside of March 26th, I believe, where the governing bodies will convene to determine if there's anything that can be done if we should fail to get where all the parties want to get you through this ordinance amendment and the proposed settlement.
Well, let me advise you, as a former judge, leave very little to judicial discretion. You can settle it, settle it.
We agree.
I have a question. I happen to live in a municipality in Palm Beach County that is going to assess the citizens for amounts of budget shortfall that we're led to believe are due to having to support these ethics initiatives. And so it creates a sense in the regular citizen of lack of support for this sort of thing. So I really applaud the county for coming forward and supporting this, but be aware that it's not just a lawsuit that is going on about these issues. So there will be other initiatives, I'm sure. I don't know whether it is in fact financial or whether in fact it's to undermine the Inspector General, but I hope it's not the latter.
Okay. And now we're right into our IG committee discussion, so I guess we can go into whatever other things concern the committee at this time. Did you have anything else? Okay, this is our point to say whatever we would like to bring up before the IG committee.
I just follow up my own commentary to Commissioner Fiore. When I see quotes in the paper from mayors and city officials that describe, for example, the Ethics Commission as sending people to jail, I'm left to interpret that as.
I take offense to that. That's what I do.
Yeah, well, exactly. And so that's why I'm saying I mean, we obviously don't do that, and there's been enough training that public officials should know that, and so I assume that they know that, which leads me only to conclude that there's an agenda of associated with disinformation, and so I'm concerned that it's hard to overcome a 73% mandate but it seems though that people still try. And I just want to say that I think the public is smarter than that. I'd like to believe they are, and I think that as people, when I said before that, I think it's important that the public not have ethics fatigue, because this is fundamental to governance, to good governance, and the fact that this may continue to happen in the future or continue to happen around the country is no excuse. You know, you can change public consciousness. I remember as a child when people used to routinely clean their automobiles by rolling down the window and throwing things out on the roadside, and that was accepted public behavior. But as a society, we changed that. And now if you saw someone throw out a McDonald's bag, it would be tantamount to environmental terrorism. And that's how our public consciousness has changed. And I do believe, and I am optimistic that we can make a footprint in public corruption and accountability. That doesn't, but I guess it's naive to think that people won't fight you along the way by whatever mechanism they can cloak as legitimate, means to do it. I think we've seen a lot of roadblocks, and we're likely to see more. But I think the public needs to maintain vigilance in this area.
Okay, Mr. Frost, did you want to?
I just want to thank General Steckler for her comments about our comments. I, and I'm sure everyone else on the dais, takes your independence and the independence of the office of the IG very importantly. And we are offering our comments only to see if, from all the diverse comments that you got, if there's something that can make the office work better. And that's our goal. So if it doesn't work, just let us know. That's the point of this, and we appreciate the fact that you're so forthcoming in accepting those comments. And thank you.
My suggestion is, I think I talked with you about it before. As chairperson, it seemed a little unclear. There's some unclear spaces in the procedural aspect, and I'd like to have some attention given to a method selected for calling a meeting. I didn't see in there where I could call a meeting or you could call it. They said that we have to have an annual meeting, and the ordinance specifies once a year, but it doesn't say that you can have it more, and it doesn't say it says you have to have it at least twice. So I thought there may be a situation in which we need to get together other than that, and so I'd like for you to come up with some language in there as to how, what mechanics of that would work in calling a special meeting should the need arise.
My view is all our comments are advisory. You can take them under advisement. People have, not listened to my advice for years, so it wouldn't be the first time. I don't take it personally. But I see the role of these meetings as giving you a viewpoint, a way to understand. Since we cannot talk to each other about these things, the only place we have to share or interact among these and help each other, learn about it is in public. So there will be comments that can be dispensed with and others that are gems, and I don't know which ones are which, and I'll leave that to you. But I do think we have an advisory role so that what our sense of importance priorities are. You may not share them, and that just means that the next meeting you will justify the ones that you've chosen. It doesn't mean that you have to take on anything that we say as being particularly dispositive, but it does mean that, we need to hear a justification, and I think that's reasonable.
All right, with that having been said, and our having exhausted our comments, we'll open it up to the public, and forgive me for not having announced earlier about the cards, filling the cards out. So at this time, do we have any cards?
No cards.
No cards. Is there anybody who hasn't filed anything wants to say something? All right, sir, come on. That's Mr. Santamaria. Just for the record, sir, give us your name. We all know you, but.
For the record, Jess Santamaria. Today I'd like to speak to you as a resident of Palm Beach County for the last 38 years. I take a lot of pride in that I've been a very involved citizen of Palm Beach County and have been invited to multiple organizations on advisory capacity on boards, such as the schools, elementary, middle, and high schools. I've been on boards of hospitals, chambers of commerce, churches. So I'm really highly active in my community for the last 38 years and continues to be. You know, my running for elected office was something my family did not want, nor did I really want, but I felt that I had to do something. Over these years, you know, one thing I've learned, and I really need to let everybody know, if you don't already know it, there's a pent-up demand for government to be open to listen to the concerns of the public, especially over the last 20 years. Especially, it's really the concern of the public with respect to government service has started to accelerate in the late 80s to the 90s, and of course the last 10 years. So there is a pent-up demand for people are giving up, that nobody's listening to them. That's the biggest complaint I keep hearing from the general public, that they're frustrated, there's nobody listening to them. And that's the reason why both the Ethics Commission and the Office of Inspector General is so important. So important. The people need to know that there's somebody that's going to listen to them, because they feel so frustrated. And that's why you get this Wall Street occupation and the Tea Party group. They keep expanding and different. It's just frustration of the public that there's nobody listening to their concerns. And that's the reason why it's so, you know, this referendum, when I heard about the referendum, I actually expected more than 90% of the public to vote to include the 38 cities. I mean, it was a strong mandate of the public that showed, you know, 72-73% result. Really should, based on my own experience with the public, it's really more like 90+%. The public needs somebody to listen to. You know, one of the things I think that has to be further clarified to the public is a little bit confused, and that came up again, I guess, in one of your discussions this afternoon. Is they're really not sure whether they should go to the Ethics Commission or to the Office of Inspector General. There's still confusion of who handles what, and I think we need to do some further education on explain to them when the Ethics Commission is the proper party and when the Office of Inspector General, because there's still uncertainty. I get that all the time. So I hope we'll continue educating the public through different media on what the role of the Ethics Commission is and what the role of the Inspector General is. So that's my first thought here. The second thought is, you know, the public defender asked our Inspector General, you know, what one of the most difficult things you've learned in the past year and a half or so as you've moved on in your job. And I was thinking to myself, I think if I were in your shoes, the way I would have answered it is that it's quite odd that the organizations that the Office of Inspector General is supposed to be investigating and checking on are able to basically stop your work by holding off funding. And that's what we're experiencing here today is, you got the 15 municipalities who the job of the Office of Inspector General is supposed to check on and investigate. So it seems they have the ability to tie your hands up, and it's an odd, difficult situation. I think that's, I read the bylaws of the organization, the ordinance, and it uses the word independence repeatedly, in the independence of the Inspector General's office. But how can you really be independent if you're dependent on the funding to do your job by the people you're investigating? It's to me, it's there's some I have a real problem with that concept, I never expected this to happen. To me, it was a shocker when the 15 municipalities said, "We're not going to pay you," and she has to come to the county commission to be able to get her job done. And thank God, we got that taken care of last when was that, Tuesday or Wednesday? We were able to do that. We do have the tools to make the job independent, and the tool is that the way unless I misunderstood it, the guidance provided by the grand jury was that the Inspector General's office was going to be funded by contracts of vendors, and the concept of the funding is really similar to the way building departments of municipalities and the county are funded. It's self-supporting. In other words, the building department of municipalities are funded by building permits. So the people doing business or building in a particular municipality, they pay a permit fee every time they build a house or an office building or a shopping center. It is those fees that provides the funding of the building department for the employees' salaries, for the office space, electric and water. So, and if they collected too much, next year they'll lower the cost of the building permit. It's supposed to be just enough to pay for the department. So when they collect too little, then they increase the building permit the next year. Our ordinance is perfect because it allows us to adjust the 1/4%. The 1/4% is only initial guideline that seems to work in Miami-Dade. But should her office require to go up to 1/3%, we have the ability to go up a little bit. And 1/4 or 1/3% is, as I've said many times before, is peanuts. Some of you know I'm a contractor myself for over 30 years. A contractor usually builds up at least 20% gross profit. So the 1/4 or 1/3% is nothing. It really doesn't affect the bidding process. When businesses come before government and want to bid on building a building or selling trucks or equipment, that 1/4 of a person doesn't really come into play at all. It's a nothing. It's a very small amount that's supposed to fund the Office of Inspector General. So when I saw that the municipalities were going to be charging the general fund, that's not the way it's supposed to work. It's not supposed to be it's not supposed to be the taxpayer. The taxpayer is not supposed to be funding the Office of Inspector General. The vendors and contractors are supposed to do it. And I'm still dumbfounded why we're not doing it. The county initially voted voted 7-0 to charge the vendors and contractors. But then when it was time to do the actual billing, we found that we had to change the computer system, and it was going to cost $500,000. That should have been just treated as a loan to fund the $500,000, and then recoup it from the fees. And because of the $500,000 cost of changing the computer billing system, we decided to charge the general fund, which is again general fund meaning taxpayer ad valorem taxes. So I persisted in trying to say that's not the way it's supposed to work. So finally, the county now is going to revert back to the way it was meant to be, is meaning charging the vendor contracts. So I would expect that all the other 38 municipalities do likewise, charge the vendors. And if right now it doesn't even appear that we need the 1/4%, we're only charging 0.18% of what was the projected budget. So the long and short of this statement I'm making is that we have the tools to fund the Office of Inspector General and make that office truly independent. It should not be dependent on elected officials to turn the faucet on or turn the faucet off. It should be completely adjustable on the vendor contracts. If 0.25 is not enough, lower it to 0.18, which in fact is what's being charged now. If it's not enough, it can go up to 0.33. So to me, it's so darn simple, and I hope we'll all wake up and get the job done. We do need the Office of Inspector General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. Is there anyone else who wishes to address Mr. Radcliffe? What's your name for the record, please?
Richard Radcliffe, I'm the Executive Director of the Palm Beach County Inter-Cities. And I guess I'd like us to also remember one thing and look at the big picture. And sometimes we kind of lose what that is, and we focus on articles or this and that. And the one thing that is most important, and all of us have to do, and I think Executive Director Johnson, and we've discussed it about bringing up things in the past and this and issues and in the C county that we talk about. And we got to stop saying that. We have to focus on the future. And the amazing thing is, 2 years ago, none of this existed. None of these people existed. None of this process existed. And independent of what it's here, it's going to work. We're all embracing it. It's going to happen. But we have to tell that, like Commissioner Santa Maria, everybody's got to know that this county is getting healthier every day, one little step at a time. We can't focus on the past, what we were, who was convicted or gone. They've already done their time. They're out somewhere having a good time. We got to focus on where we're headed. And it's very important. Every time these people go out, or we sit and agonize over readings and an advisory opinion, somebody learns something. There's a question and somebody gets an answer. The same thing here. So I really think that at this point in time we have to begin to move on and focus on the good work that's being done, and the fact that this county, every day, a little bit at a time, every time they leave somewhere, or every time there's an advisory opinion, somebody's learning something and it's getting better. And we have to focus on that. I think we have to, like what Commissioner Santa Maria said, we have to focus on how this county is going to be leading the country. One little day at a time. Thank you.
No doubt about it. Next year, Forbes will have a whole lot nicer things to say. But anything else? There's nothing else. We'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you all so much for coming. Meeting's adjourned.